Good evening. Welcome to APTN National News. I'm Melissa Ridgen. Tomorrow is Budget Day in Ottawa, and much of the talk on the eve of that is the federal government, how it needs to make housing a priority in rural, urban, and remote communities. Here's Fraser Needham with more.
NDP MP Nikki Ashton knows all about Indigenous housing needs. Her riding in northern Manitoba has several First Nations, many, she says, that are dealing with substandard housing. Ashton says the Trudeau government cannot wait any longer to do something.
Indigenous housing needs to be a priority. It's something we were very clear in terms of this agreement, and that needs to start now. There's no question that the situation is only getting worse in the communities that I represent, and communities across, in Indigenous communities across the country. We know that the COVID-19 pandemic hit Indigenous communities harder because of the housing circumstances.
Investments in Indigenous housing are part of the Liberal NDP agreement signed last month. It says the government will make significant additional investments in 2022. Also, housing in non-Indigenous communities has been talked about a lot on the eve of the federal budget. Conservative opposition asked the Liberals about the lack of affordable housing across the country in question period.
Like most Canadians, David doesn't come from money or a rich family. Apart from winning the lottery, there is literally no chance that he will ever be able to afford a home. My question for the Prime Minister is, what would he like to say to David?
For his part, the Prime Minister says the budget will address the current housing crunch.
Mr. Speaker, we've heard from Canadians across the country, like David and others, who are facing challenges with the rising cost of living, with the crushing pressures of the housing market, and that's why we're focused on supporting them. We made a promise to David and to Canadians like him across the country that we'd have their backs through the difficult 2 years of the pandemic and beyond, and that's exactly what we continue to do. In tomorrow's budget, you will see significant investments in housing.
These investments and possible ones in First Nations will be revealed on Thursday, when Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland tables the federal budget. Fraser Needham, APTN National News, Ottawa.
The Federation of Sovereign Indigenous Nations in Saskatchewan echoes calls for tomorrow's budget to address the growing housing crisis. Here's Leanne Sanders with more.
FSIN Chief Bobby Cameron is calling for a federal investment of $15 billion for Indigenous housing. He says the National Housing Council's recent call for $6.3 billion over the next 2 years is way too low. Cameron says government needs to honor the treaty right to shelter.
When we put out the number of $15 billion, that's just a start. See, we're playing a game of catch up here. And all of our housing experts, our leadership who have been involved with housing for several decades know this all too well.
It appears Indigenous Services Minister Patty Hajdu knows this too, saying on APTN's Face-to-Face last night that the need is dire.
Both new housing to accommodate growing populations and crowded situations, but also for repairs and renovations of existing units. And indeed, if it's not the first thing that I'm hearing from chiefs and councils, it's for sure the second thing. And, you know, of course, with housing being a critical social determinant of health, community leaders are very well aware of the links between housing and the ability to protect residents from things like spreading COVID-19 or even tuberculosis and other illnesses. But not only that, the connection between good housing, decent housing, and mental health and educational outcomes.
But Chief Cameron says year after year, the federal budget allocation for First Nations housing falls way short, and it's past time for this to be rectified.
Prime Minister Trudeau, if you're listening to this, we expect and we strongly encourage that you and your colleagues allocate those funds as soon as possible. We don't want to wait 6 months to a year to build more houses on reserve. We need it, and we need it now.
Leanne Sanders, APTN National News, Saskatoon.
Indigenous leaders in British Columbia are hopeful after the BC government announced an action plan to advance the UN Declaration of Rights of Indigenous People. The Declaration Act Action Plan lays out 89 improvements on reconciliation. Lee Wilson reports.
So today is really all about this. It's all about.
At a press conference, Cheryl Casimir of First Nations Summit holds up a copy of British Columbia's Declaration Act Action Plan. The action plan was co-developed by the province, Indigenous leaders, and communities.
There were many First Nations who had an opportunity to speak directly and provide their input directly into the action plan, as well as many written submissions because of the fact that we weren't able to meet in person due to the pandemic. But yeah, I'm pretty excited about seeing what comes as a result of this plan.
Indigenous leaders have expressed optimism since the unveiling of the action plan last week. Casimir says there's still work that will need to be done on issues like shared decision-making and the alignment of laws between government and Indigenous nations. Indigenous Relations Minister Murray Rankin says the Declaration Act Action Plan is the first in the world and will start to address the wrongs of colonization. The act is guided by 4 themes: title and rights of Indigenous people, self-determination and self-government, ending Indigenous-specific racism, and social culture and economic well-being.
For example, in education, that the outcome isn't just that the graduation rates will improve. We don't say that for Indigenous kids. We say that the outcome we all agree to is that they will be the same or better than non-Indigenous kids. We put it in the positive as an aspiration, and then we say, okay, how are we going to get there?
According to Minister Rankin, the action plan will require an annual report to be submitted to legislature each year.
It's not one of these reports that's going to sit on a shelf somewhere and gather dust. Its requirement right in the statute is we must bring out an annual report. So every year we're held to account, and every single ministry of our government is involved in this as something they've got to do under the action plan.
Priority issues that the First Nations Summit has been working on are child and family services, forestry, and environmental assessment. Casimir believes the province will need to work with each nation to find their specific need.
Making sure that it's done in a manner that is respectful of each nation's, ability, right? Because the United Nations Declaration, speaks to self-determination, and it's the nation's decision to determine what those priorities are.
Lee Wilson, APTN National News, Kitimat.
2 Vancouver police officers committed professional misconduct after they handcuffed a grandfather and a granddaughter outside a Bank of Montreal in Vancouver 3 years ago. That's the finding of a retired judge who reviewed the matter and released his findings today. In December 2019, Maxwell Johnson Sr. and his 12-year-old granddaughter went to this Bank of Montreal in downtown Vancouver to open up her very first bank account. After the bank teller saw their status cards, she suspected the federally issued ID was fake. And she called the police, and they were handcuffed and questioned without being arrested. The decision states that those 2 police officers committed professional misconduct. We're going to have more on that story tomorrow. The civilian agency in Ontario that investigates police brutality has closed its probe into a Mohawk woman who was trampled by a police horse. It happened at the Freedom Convoy protests in Ottawa back in February. The decision comes following an interview with the woman, a review of police drone and body-worn camera footage, as well as reviewing the woman's medical records. The woman was treated for a strained shoulder after she was knocked down by a police horse that was walking through a crowd of people. Because she didn't suffer fractures or worse, her injury isn't considered serious. So the decision said that the Special Investigations Unit only investigates serious injury or deaths involving police. So now this file is closed. A Northwest Territories community is exploring new ways to fight crime, not with the traditional police model. We'll tell you all about that after this break. Fort Liard in the Northwest Territories is exploring ways of preventing crime and responding to emergency situations without using typical police enforcement. Our reporter Charlotte Moore-Jacobs explains how the pilot program could set a precedent for other communities.
When Dylan Steeves goes into work, he never knows what calls for help will greet him. What he can be certain of is he'll respond to those requests with understanding. That's because he's an officer developing and implementing the Northwest Territories' first community policing program. Since September 2021, at Atrodenico, Fort Liard, Northwest Territories has been learning how to keep their community safe on their own terms, in their own way.
Connect with people on a personal level. They're not throwing someone in from somewhere else that no one knows. And I think that's a good part of building relationships is there's already a relationship there, and we know everyone in the community, everyone knows us.
Steeves is one of 2 officers on the job, both local, both Indigenous. They've received training on victim and trauma-informed approaches, operational readiness, behavior of people in crisis, and more.
Just getting to the root cause of the issue they're dealing with, not beating around the bus, you know. Just ask those questions, let them know that we're there for them, let them know that we're there to help, and you know, just get down to the basis of it and try not to, you know, escalate it to more than what it is.
The Hamlet Senior Administrator, John McKee, says the program will offer community-based responses to public safety issues and reduce the number of calls to RCMP.
We identified this as one of the priorities because it's been mentioned by community members and people not knowing where to turn, and they're really vulnerable.
The program makes elder safety a priority.
We're going to have a sign that we put in each elder's house, and it will have a number, and then we'll do a brief resume of who's in the house, if there's any disabilities, any issues in that house. And this will be available to us, the RCMP, social services, that type of person, so they know when they go to that house, they'll have the background.
Officers also respond to concerns over the safety of intoxicated individuals.
We try to get people to a warm, safe place where someone could take care of them, and usually calling the RCMP is the last kind of action that we would take if there's no other options.
A keystone to the program, the fact officers don't have authority to enforce laws, nor do they carry weapons. They respond to non-criminal concerns and foster relationships between community and RCMP.
and I think that's where we go back to the important part of being from the community and everyone knowing us. So, growing up in the community and living around everyone that lives here, I think that kind of makes us feel safe. And I don't think there's any sort of need to carry any sort of self-defense weapons or anything like that. And then again, it makes us more approachable. You don't want to approach someone who has a baton and pepper spray. And
The program is earmarked for 3 years with territorial funding that comes in just over $300,000. Charlotte Mort-Jacobs, APTN National News, Fort Liard.
Thanks for that, Charlotte. That was a great story. A Saskatchewan Métis lawyer and an activist wants to become the first Indigenous leader of the NDP in Saskatchewan. Caitlin Harvey joins Regina MLA Carla Beck in the NDP leadership race, which will be decided on June 26th. Harvey says the recent death of her cousin to an overdose was the catalyst for this bid.
And every day that I went out on the doorstep,
She addressed supporters today and said running was not in her plans until the death of Brendan Vermette in Saskatchewan Penitentiary 2 weeks ago. She says Saskatchewan needs to do better for all people.
addiction, and violence and trauma, and discrimination, loss and grief are some of the reasons that my cousin's freedom and ability to choose options in life were limited. He did what others around him had been doing his whole life, and eventually drugs got the best of him.
Manitoba Métis Federation members gathered for their annual general meeting in late March. A small part of the agenda was their response to a workshop critical of its governance, put on by an independent collective calling itself Red River Echoes. Amelia Fournier has this.
Inherent wisdom and understanding about what Métis governance means, and so
Red River Echoes held a virtual governance workshop ahead of the MMF's annual General Assembly.
I just want us to think critically about
and it caused a stir at the live stream meeting held in Winnipeg.
So you've disrespected them, you've disrespected our own process, and you've disrespected everyone that's sitting in this crowd. Because you don't agree with something. If you want to run for something, and I've said it already this morning, then run for something.
But people have a right to speak, people have a right to share their opinion, but people have to respect the democracy of our government, and the dem will better, because I'll protect it, I assure you that.
But MMF Housing Minister and Assembly Chair Will Goodon tamped down the rhetoric, saying,
I think both sides need to take a deep breath, to be quite honest.
He said the conflicts distract from real issues facing the nation.
In my opinion, the real battle is protecting the nation, protecting who we are, because there's folks out there who are pretending to be us.
So I'm going to share my screen here.
He also said the workshop was misinformed, saying the MMF is governed by the Manitoba Business Act.
And that was another issue that was raised about the corporate structure of the MMF, and that is not there anymore. We literally signed a self-government recognition agreement last summer, so there's no corporate body anymore.
I'm 28 years old. My mom died when I was 21. I went to law school right after that.
He highlighted the relative inexperience of the group, but admired their passion.
These Red River Echoes young folks who are doing the work there, they've got the fire in their belly. I've got the fire in my belly. The president does too, and we all want the same thing, which is to have the Métis Nation move forward in a good way.
Goodon hopes the MMF and Red River Echoes can come to an understanding for the good of the nation, and encourages the collective to get involved with MMF locals.
A constitution establishes our particular worldview or legal order.
Brianne Lavallée-Heckert, who ran the workshop, says she no longer feels that she will personally be able to work with the MMF, but other collective members, many of whom are active in MMF locals, may be able to.
That's what I think our focus is on right now, is like our own healing and well-being. And if the MMF does, and the MMF cabinet don't likewise take their own healing seriously, we're not going to engage.
Amelia Fournier, APTN National News, Montreal.
It's no secret there are several gaps in the K-12 education system in Northern Canada. Now, a new report by a federal task force on education is taking a close look at those gaps. Here's Sarah Connors.
A recent report on the K-12 education system in the North has found it is not preparing students for post-secondary success, especially Indigenous students. The report was released by an independent task force on education appointed by Northern Affairs Minister Dan Vandal. The task force looked at education systems in places like Nunavut, Labrador, and northern Manitoba. It found northern students face many educational barriers compared to the south. One notable finding was northern students often graduate high school lacking basic academic skills like reading and math. The task force also noted First Nations students in places like the Yukon commonly have to take years of upgrading before entering post-secondary. The distance of post-secondary institutions was found to be another barrier. The task force states Northern and Indigenous students often struggle mentally and financially while attending post-secondary in the South away from their support systems. The report lists several calls to action for improving Northern education. They include supporting Indigenous-led programs that foster family engagement and learning, as well as funding for Indigenous post-secondary programming. Sarah Connors, APTN National News, Whitehorse.
The Pope has said he plans to visit Canada to expand upon the apology that he offered residential school survivors last week. When we come back, an archbishop thinks that might include repealing the doctrine of discovery. We'll tell you what that means after the break. Welcome back. It's time now for our photo of the day. The snotty-nosed res kids from Kitimat, BC were in Winnipeg, Manitoba for a packed venue of music and celebration last night. Sandra Seidel was there. She took it all in and sent in this picture of rappers Darren Metz and Quentin Nice. You can send your pictures by email to share@aptn.ca for the chance to be our next photo of the day. Now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. To the east coast, we got 2 in flurries for St. John's, sunshine, and 5 for Charlottetown. 0 and sunny for La Grande River. Kuujjuaq, mix of sun and cloud, -5 degrees. Chibougamau, 3 and some flurries possibly there. 7 and cloud for Montreal. 7 and cloud for Ottawa. North Bay, you get some showers, possibly 9 degrees. 1 and a chance of snow for Thunder Bay. Sioux Lookout, same thing, but you get a degree warmer at 2. Norway House, 7 and rain. God's Lake, sunshine, and 3. Snow for Brandon, 4 degrees. Same with you in Gimli. 3 and snow for Winnipeg. 6 and sunny for Swift Current. 8 and sunshine for Saskatoon and North Battleford. 7 and sunny for Buffalo Narrows. 4 and sunshine for Meadow Lake. Sunny and 8 for Fort Chip and Fort McMurray. Sunny and 10 for Edmonton, 12 and sunshine for Medicine Hat. Vancouver 16 and sunny skies, 18 for Penticton and Kamloops. You're sunny there too. 8 and rain for Smithers, 12 and showers for Prince George. 4 and sunny for Beaver Creek, 0 and sunny for Rock River. Yellowknife 3 degrees and sunny skies, 1 for Norman Wells, sunshine there. 1 for you as well in Paulatuck and sunny. Sun continues for Colville Lake, -3. 4 and snow for New Yacht, 5 and sunny for RV at Whale Cove and Chesterfield. Igloolik -9 and snow, Clyde River -12. You're getting snow too. Lots of reaction in Indian country after Pope Francis' apologies last week, both favorable and not. On In Focus today, we dissected all of it with guests including Murray Sinclair, Dan David, Russ Diabo, Rachel Ann Snow, and our own award-winning journalist Tina House, who was in Rome for that delegation. And we heard from an archbishop who thinks that it's just the beginning and that the Vatican could scrap the very document that set the stage for the destruction caused by colonialism.
The doctrine of discovery it's strange. It's a papal document that was really drawn up in the 15th century, fundamentally to arbitrate between the Spanish and the Portuguese on parts of the New World that they could discover. But within it, there have been interpretations and so on in which it seemed to legitimate colonization, not just fair settlement, but colonization. And that document has made its way into some common law, particularly in the United States, but also in Canada, and has been used, I think, unfairly in the past, particularly in working together on questions of land dispute. It would be helpful, and I think it is coming. Here's another hopeful sign, that there will be a document produced from Rome which would clearly repudiate the doctrine of discovery. In fact, de facto, it hasn't been acted on, and even centuries ago, there was a pulling back from it. But kind of a clear, expressed repudiation would be helpful, and I'll bet you, Melissa, that it's going to come.
A repudiation. I guess we'll wait and see if that happens. The Canadian Screen Award recognizes Best in Broadcast Documentary and Film. We told you yesterday about 3 wins that APTN News racked up. Well, an APTN original documentary series, Spirit Talker, also won for Best Director.
My name is Sean Leonard. I'm an Aboriginal medium, and I speak the language of spirit.
Halifax-based director and Inuit filmmaker Stephanie Clattenburg won Best Direction in a Factual Series on Monday. Spirit Talker follows Mi'kmaq medium Sean Leonard as he travels across the country to connect the living with the dead, bringing hope and closure to many communities. The win makes for a total of 4 Canadian Screen Awards for APTN and APTN News, so congratulations to us for that. Well, that is a wrap on your midweek news. I'm Melissa Ridgen. Thanks so much for joining us. Have a great night. We'll see you tomorrow.